Welcome to the Firehouse Yak, the podcast where the flames of knowledge and camaraderie burn bright. Your host is Peter Matthews, Firehouse's editor-in-chief. Join us as we dive into the hottest topics for firefighters and fire chiefs alike, from cutting-edge fireground operations to the fuel of motivation and leadership in the fire service. Each show features the names you know or the people you need to know as they share their thoughts and insights. Get ready for a great conversation that fuels your passion and ignites your desire to grow in the fire service. This is the Firehouse Yak podcast, where the fire service comes to talk, share, and inspire. Let's turn up the heat, or maybe just turn up that dial. Hello and welcome back to the Firehouse Yak. I'm Peter Matthews, editor here at Firehouse, and excited to have Jared Vermeulen on. He's the modern fire officer, the author of the book, and we're going to talk about fire officer and leadership stuff today. I was talking a little bit earlier. I was trying to have him on a little bit later this year to kind of spice up the variety of the shows, but we've had a lot of conversations about fire officers today and leadership in general in the fire service. But again, I think it's what folks want to hear, right? They're trying to figure out what they're doing. You've got a crop of new officers coming into the fire service. You hear the good, the bad, the ugly. But on top of that, I think there's a lot of folks looking for leadership development and they're not getting it, right? And I think, from conversations I've had, there's a lot of departments that promote you and that's it. You're now a leader, good luck. And we hope you lead your crew. And I think what's lost in a lot of places, and which is great about your book, Jared, is that it's not about the fireground stuff, right? And again, that's you hopefully learned that through the first few years of your career, and you train up on that. But it's all that personnel stuff, right? All the stuff that happens in the house and in the cab, that really needs to be looked at. So your book came out at a good time, and I'm glad to have you on the show today. Before we begin, I just have a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost is the Firehouse Valor and Community Service Awards. The nominations will be closing this week on Friday. If you have somebody that you would like to nominate for a rescue or an extraordinary effort on a fireground rescue scenario, you can go to firehouse.com/valor and you can submit there. That's for incidents that happen in 2025 only. For the Community Service Awards, that can be over the last few years, right? We know a lot of these programs take 3 to 4 years from concept to execution to kind of getting some of the data. So we're always looking for departments who have really good community, outreach programs, community risk reduction, fire prevention, and life safety. It's not necessarily a lifetime achievement award. We would love to do that, but we know there's so many dedicated folks that we probably wouldn't have enough pages and 3 or 4 issues to do a lifetime achievement. But if you do have somebody for the Community Service Awards, again, just go to firehouse.com/valor, and that nomination period closes on Friday. The Station Design Conference is coming up. I know we've talked about that. I'm actually excited to announce that we finally got some folks together to do a podcast. So the next podcast we roll out here on the Yak, that's going to be with Janet Wilmoth, who's the conference director. We'll also have Mike Scott and Pat Stone, who are both architects, really enveloped in the fire service and public safety facilities. So that show will be coming out in about 2 weeks. And then the early bird registrations for Station Design Conference end on February 28th. So you've got a couple of weeks to take advantage of some of those discounts. We've got a couple webinars coming up as well. We've got PPE maintenance in April. We've got a program on ISO that's coming out later this month, following up on a really good program with Mike Marash from ISO and Verisk, as well as Robbie King from Vector Solutions, kind of going through those top 10 challenges that fire departments find specific to training with ISO. So you can find those archived and upcoming webinars at firehouse.com/webinars. Go ahead and check those out. If you haven't registered, go ahead and do that. But the show today, I'm excited to have Jared Van Mueller on, or Vermeulen, I'm sorry, on the show today. Jared, thanks for joining us today, and let us know, let our listeners know a little bit about your fire service background, who you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, so a little over 18 years, the city of Boca Raton Fire Rescue. It's I guess, a mid-sized city for South Florida. 8 stations. We're fully ALS. Every unit has paramedics. There's no EMTs at all on the department, so it's full fire rescue. I specialize in hazardous materials, rope rescue, trench rescue, confined space, CMR, with the department, and then I'm the peer support coordinator as well for our department. And right now, I am the senior captain at our training station, which is Station 5, and I do a lot of final type evaluation for our driver engineers and our captains that are coming up through the ranks for mentorship, for we have a step up program where they have to show proficiency through skills in a packet form, and then I evaluate that they can do that, and then they're given the sign off that they will be able to fulfill that role and be able to take promotional tests. And that's kind of where a lot of the information from my book, The Modern Fire Officer, comes from. Communicate, motivate, and lead. That comes from really all the conversations that I've had doing that mentorship, realizing that the tactics, the physical things are so much easier to just have someone learn than the soft skills because the
Yeah.
soft skills just go so much deeper. And yeah, so that's my background there. I unfortunately don't come from a long line of firefighters. I'm first generation, but hopefully it'll start with me, and my boys will maybe take off where the old man left off.
That's awesome. So then what got you into the fire service?
Yeah.
What led you down this path?
So originally I was going to the Fort Lauderdale Art Institute for industrial design. For That's pretty much like prototyping because I've always liked making things,
Okay.
designing and at the time it was early 2000s, and it's just all computer based. You're just sitting in a cubicle all day long, and I have a few friends that were firefighters that know me, and they're like, listen, you're not going to do that with your life. You're going to become a firefighter. And I was like, oh, okay.
Good advice.
And I was like, well, tell me what it is. And they're like, well, why don't you just like come ride? We'll show you. You can see what it's like. And I was like, okay, I think I'll do this now. And I quit that and put in for EMT and fire at the same time, and got accepted to EMT. So then I went through EMT paramedic, and then at the time, a lot of our soldiers were coming back and joining and becoming firefighters, and they had more points for the
Yeah.
application process. So I had to wait for a while to get my fire, and then I got my fire, and then got hired with the city of Boca.
That's great. That's an interesting path, and
Yep.
again, I think the one thing if folks don't know about that, right? In Florida, you kind of have to get all of your training before you can get hired, right? Most places
Right.
you don't go to the academy, you don't test and go to the academy, right? It's you get all your
Yeah.
training on the front end, and then you get hired within
Yeah.
it.
And there's
So,
no sponsorships either, so you have to do it all on your own, which
well,
it makes it a little bit difficult for if you already have a family, if you need to
yeah,
put bread on the table, it's bring on the bacon. It's hard to do that and work, and then hopefully get hired. A lot of that has changed now. The market, I feel like, is a lot more open now than it was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. But yeah, it's you got to do it on your own.
yeah, yeah. I knew some guys when I was growing up that left New York to do that, and they struggle trying to balance life in the academy and everything else like that, and then being able to still afford living in Florida, and again, this is a long time ago, but it's an interesting model. But again, every place has its own way of doing things. So let's jump into something else again. As we're kind of bringing into the show is fun fact, right? And again, I always say this every show. I'd like to thank Jake Ricks over at the Hazard Class podcast for kind of giving us this idea. So, what's something a little different, unique about yourself that folks may not know? And we just learned something, right, about where you were going before you got into fire service. But what's something else you can share?
Well, it kind of builds off that making things a guitarist since I was a kid. So now I kind of well, that tinkering that I need to do, I do that on building guitars. So I have one that I built right here. I could
Really?
show you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool.
So this
Very
one
cool.
here is piano keys that
Oh
are
my
set into
gosh.
epoxy. So those are actual piano keys from an upright piano, and then
Wow.
they're set in epoxy, and that was a true pain in the butt to to
How heavy is
build.
that? It looks heavy. Is it heavy or?
It's heavy. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
heavy, but
yeah.
it's not too bad. But yeah, it was a lot of
Wow.
elbow grease to get that one nice and shiny.
That is awesome. Maybe you should have stayed in the design where even though you're doing great stuff in the fire service, maybe that's your retirement job right there. That's very cool, man.
It might be. It might be.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
That's good. We've had some folks, they're pilots and stuff like that, but but to talk about it and see that, that's cool. So I appreciate you sharing, and hopefully we have you back on. We can get whatever your next design is. That'd be awesome to see.
Cool.
So let's go to the Modern Fire Officer, right? The book that came out that you authored, and I know you kind of talked about it a little bit, but you know, why did you write this, right? Because again, there's a lot of textbooks out there, and it's interesting. We were talking before we got going. Your book is now being used for tests, which is really nice to see, right? Again, it's beyond the textbooks. So what led you to, author this book?
Yeah, I feel like there was like a place for it because a lot of the books when that I had to read or that were available was like Who Moved My Cheese, or or
Yeah,
something that just like kind of like just blandly talked about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or it was just a lot of stuff that was not really actionable, like buzzwords or stuff that wasn't like just think this way, do this thing, and that's why. And a lot of it too never dealt with anything that was like in here, right? So to me, like the leadership, it starts here with you and how you feel like inside, how you treat yourself is really how you treat anyone externally. So if you aren't leading yourself, you're not leading anyone else, not appropriately at least, and that takes a lot of retrospection. You have to really be honest with yourself about where you're not good and figure out how to make it good. And once you are able to do that, then you're truly leading, right? People take notice of that, right? And then you're creating wake at that point because you're forging ahead in a system where like you're doing the right thing for you. People take notice of that, and a lot of times because of that, they'll get in line because they can see that you're doing that. So it's kind of that soft skill portion of that. There are some other things in there that I talk about, like dealing with fear and kind of like and dealing with mental health and a lot of that kind of stuff. Just you don't see it in Firehouse like leadership. Really, it's I don't know if it's because it's a taboo or it's hard to talk about, but I thought that those things were extremely important because the guys and girls that I train, we'd be going through some certain situations and they're like, yeah, I don't know, I'm like so worried, I'm scared. I'm like, I'm scared too. Like some of the stuff that
yeah,
like I have an airport in my zone that's extremely busy. That scares the hell out of me all the time. I mean, and it's not going to go away, but there's a way to, figure out, what does scare you, work to mitigating that to the point where now your fear is a healthy fear that's going to help you in risk assessment, that's going to help you do the right thing, not make you immobile. And a lot of those types of like unspoken, it's kind of soft skill wasn't available in my opinion in a lot of the fire officer textbooks, and a lot of them were very long too. And one thing I know about firefighters is like keep it short and sweet,
yeah. Attention
So
span
the
is
book
key.
is, yeah, the book is very deliberately small with
Yeah,
large text. So you feel like when you're reading it, like, yeah, I get through this thing in like 2 seconds.
yeah,
Because I don't want you to be like, oh my God, going on and on, you're going through the paper like God. And I want it to be like easy. So
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, and again, I've heard some great things about it. Like I said, I've listened to some other shows. I've heard some feedback about the book, and so far it's good. And again, I think, it's a testament to the fact that departments are using your book for their tests. I think that really goes to show, right? And again, the textbook model versus, the shorter books like yours, again, is evolving with the way we are as people today, right? How much attention do you really have? And again, growing up outside of New York City, I remember guys would come in, with their crates and crates and crates full of books that they would study. They'd have to know every single page, and I mean, they're reading, 5, 6,000 pages, and how can you retain? I mean, obviously, right? It's a learning process, a testing process, but at some point, there's so much that's in there, and how do you expect them to be able to do a good job? And, and even too, like, you look at some of the tactical books, right? So tactics that are used in the Northeast or tested on the West Coast or down here in Texas, those buildings don't even exist down here, but that's what they're focusing on. And they're so focused on passing the test that they forget what it is that they actually do where they are because It's strictly based on the text. So to be able to have something of your size with that, again, it's all personal. Right? It's all things that you've learned personally. It's sharing your stories and what you've learned, which is good. And um, did you expect it to take off like you did? I mean, was it just for you to kind of put it out to say, hey, I want to help a couple people, or were you intending for it to be on test lists and everything else like that, or
I definitely wasn't intending it to be on test lists. I didn't. It's really not like it. It's funny because when some people that reach out to me, it's on my promotion. I'm like, well, remember what the test questions are because I'd love to know what the heck they pulled from it or how they did it because like it's not like usually textbooks that they have like a bulleted format things you could just like pull
yeah,
right from. It's a little easier. This is more conversational, so it's like trying to test a conversation. I mean, again, obviously it's been done. I think a lot of the chiefs that have contacted me use it for mentorship. They like to buy it for their new officers, which is flattering. But yeah, it wasn't really meant to be out there for a test. And when I put it together, we spoke before the show. Um, I didn't have any social media for years, and now in the past couple of years, I have LinkedIn. So like to me, like I'm a no one. I'm at a mid-sized small department in Florida, and I kind of put my heart on the line a bit, with writing the book, and I don't know how the heck it's going to be perceived. People
yeah.
could tell me like you're full of crap. This is the worst thing I've ever written or I read. And like oh, so there's a little bit of stress there. I'm not going to lie. When you have this baby, you're putting it out there to see what the world thinks, and so far it's been like really really good feedback. I've been
Great.
like really happy with it, and yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
again, we'll put a link on the podcast player pages as well, but it's modernfireofficer.com. So we'll put that link up there. So, you know, throughout the book, you talk about, one thing I found was interesting was the competent leader, right? And again, a lot of times if I'm at a conference or just, conversations, and again, I mean, it's not, it's interesting because I think internally in the business world, it's like, oh, it's just here in the fire service where people are incompetent. Yeah, I'm sorry, in the business world, right? And then, I talked to somebody who's a police officer, I've talked to a firefighter, I talked to somebody who's in the military, and it's not necessarily just incompetence. It's just, again, I think part of everything is we're changing. But when you hear incompetent leader, man, that's pretty damaging. That's pretty damning for whomever it is, right? That person got promoted. Like, how did they get promoted to that point? But you talk about the competent leader in your book, which I think is key, right? And I think a lot of people once they hear that, they're probably like, oh man, I got to find out what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong, or what my boss is doing right or my boss is doing wrong. So, um, are there anything that are there any of those skills that you say like those are the top three skills that a competent leader needs to have, especially again specific to the fire service, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, number one would be your foundation. So we talked about it a little bit before, but you got to be able to lead yourself because if you're not leading yourself, then you can't lead anyone else. And what happens is when you're in a bad place with your foundation, right? There's something not right there. You haven't had honest conversations with yourself. Like I know when this external trigger happens, I'm going to react in this way, and I don't like that, and it puts people off or whatever. If we don't look at ourselves honestly, and say, okay, this is how I'm going to fix this thing. I'm going to get my self esteem up. I'm going to figure out how to deal with these things, get my confidence level up. It's going to show, and it's going to show at the bad moments because it's not going to show when things are okay. It's going to show when that trigger happens. I'm already frustrated, and then boom, I'm going to react in a way that's going to show people I'm not a competent leader. So a lot of what's outdated is the idea of leadership that um, you don't you don't even like realize that you need to do that, or you don't care to do that, like that's weak or that's a soft skill. It doesn't matter that I can build from here, that I have seniority or I have this new position to where I automatically should get this respect. And that's not how it works. You have to have self-respect and then respect others, and then you gain that respect, and that takes work on the inside. And it shows itself via symptoms in a lot of ways, right? Like if we know that we're not leading ourselves well, and we're putting on a facade when we go to work, what's going to happen? we can't hold a facade for our entire life, right?
Yeah.
So when we get home, that facade breaks down, and then who do we attack? Our family, So someone is gonna suffer, right? So if we hold the facade at home, then work suffers. If we hold the facade at work, then the home suffers. So a big thing with leadership is that it starts in here, and we have to go through that. So we have to work on, understanding this, that we're going to be making sacrifices. That's going to take self control to do that. That we should be honored to do that, but we also need to keep humility to be able to continue to feel those ways, and that it's a work in progress, right? Because there's definitely things that, as you get older, you realize like that never bothered me, and now it really bothers me, and I act
Yeah.
this way when that happens, and that is not acceptable, and that's pushing people away, not bringing them into my orbit. And so like, yeah, that kind of figuring out who you are and how you're bettering yourself, that's like the main goal. And then once you get out there, another piece of the competent leader is understanding that you're not wearing one hat. So like for example, in the fire ground, right? You have your fire helmet. That's one of your hats, but you leave that at the fire ground. You don't wear that hat back into the station. In the station, you're going to have many other hats. And in my experience, I mean, all you're doing is running fires and calls or whatever. You're not wearing that hat very often comparatively in a 24-hour shift. You're wearing a lot of other hats. And to leave that on the fire ground where it's because I said so, or we're getting this done now or whatever, that doesn't work in the firehouse. A lot more deliberate teaching and mentorship happens there. And I'll say it now, but I got a new book coming out, and in there I talk about what span of control really means. And a lot of people are taught that span of control is delegation capacity. That's kind of what it matters. But I am saying that span of control has to do with relational capacity, how well you
Interesting.
can know your people. And it's very difficult to know more than 7, 8, 9, 10 people, right? Well enough to know that this is how I need to positively motivate you. This is how well I know your background, what was going to trigger you, what's not. This is how well I know your strengths and your weaknesses, what kind of training you need and what kind of training you don't need. This is how well I know you to when you walk in the door, I already know what kind of day this is going to be.
Mm.
And that's a big deal for leaders, and that's something that a very competent leader, healthy leader would understand, that now I'm putting on a different hat. That's definitely not a fire hat or a fire helmet hat. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
something completely different now. And that's kind of where that series of my books are going, is that type of leadership. And yeah, I mean, when you look at, your LinkedIn feed or something like that, maybe it's just mine, but it like 99% of it is my boss sucks, it's like some kind of like leadership, advice or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's obviously, an issue that is cross, generations, it's cross professions. So, and I think a lot of that does have to do with what we were just talking about, with if you can lead yourself, and also realizing what real span of control is, and realizing what hat needs to go on.
It's interesting. I mean, so I worked here for 26 years. And of the 26 years, I probably worked from home for 18 of them, 17 of them. And again, just knowing the people, right? It is tough, right? And with my team, I've got weekly meetings with everybody. And the first thing is, how was your weekend? How you doing? Right? Because again, I think if you don't start that off, you can't, yeah, that's the gauge for the rest of the call. But it's an interesting fact in that, not fact, but just the when you aren't seeing those people on a regular basis, right? I'm not sure if it's like that, where you're at, but like I know, even if somebody's on the same group, if they're all on, group one or shift A or whatever it is, with vacation, with training, everything else, they may not see each other for 3 or 4 shifts, the way things fall, right? Where they could detail that for overtime. So even though you all work together, there's still a huge gap. And when you see people, and like some of my colleagues I haven't seen physically in years. And it is tough, right? I mean, you can build trust, you can build all that, but it's not the same when you're not fully connected. And my boss Bill, he's really good about just checking in with everybody outside of what's got to be done for the week, the month, the year. And actually, it's been interesting learning from him about some of that stuff because we do forget, right? And it's even interesting. Like I look at, we're recording on a Friday, and I look at that like I don't say goodbye, have a good weekend to any of my colleagues, right? It's just kind of like, oh, I signed off, done for the day. But you do lose that connection, and I used to be okay with it, but usually when I sign off on Friday, I'm like, man, good riddance, slap that screen down, power off the other screen. But you forget about that, right? Because you're in your own world when you work from home. So as again as being in the firehouse, and I see that too. I mean, from what I'm hearing, and I've read a few things. Um, just again with working with younger folks, like they want to have a connection, right? And we all joke, right? Like the connection is being ruined by this thing, right? You don't have a
Hmm.
connection, but they still want to tell you what's going on. They still want you to know what's going on in their life. And I think, the officers of the years past, right? And again, part of that mental health discussion that's going on right now, which is so important, is like, people do have feelings, and your feelings, like you mentioned earlier, right? You've got it at home. If it's not at home, it's at work, and someplace it has to go. And to be able to try to build that connection. And it is interesting. I mean, I've traditionally worked with folks older than me, and now I've got, on both sides. And it is interesting, the shift from one side to the other on the discussions. I don't know where I fall. I don't want to know, but I'm somewhere in the middle. But it is. I mean, if you don't have that personal connection, right? And again, I'm not sure about how it is there in Boca, but some places they'll do the pool or the swing where you're not even assigned to a regular house. So you're in and out. Nobody knows you. The only thing they know is that you did something 2 months ago at, Station Two, and that's all they know about you. But nobody really has a chance to get to understand who you are, and what makes you tick, or, what would set you over the edge. That's a shame because if you really want to build a cohesive team, I don't think you could do that. So that again, you mentioned earlier, but that it's the healthy part of the being an officer, the company health. I don't think anyone's ever talked about it until you brought that in. I mean, I know in peer support programs and mental health programs in general, that's discussed, but your job as a company officer, correct me if I'm wrong, but your job as a company officer is to kind of keep that pulse, right? And regulate that temperature for everybody, whether it's, an engine crew, a rescue crew, whatever it is, to kind of keep everybody on the
Yeah,
same page. Yeah.
absolutely. Your job is relationships.
Yeah.
So it's your relationship with the crew, it's the crew's relationship with each other, it's all of your relationships with the hierarchy above you, it's your relationship with the community, and how you present yourself when you're on whether it's a fire scene or a medical scene, and that's a lot. And if you're not open and willing to experience that and to communicate well, then yeah, you're going to have a leadership problem. And I think that's what a lot of our leadership problems stem from, is that lack of relational understanding and the importance of it. And again, like that's kind of part of what outdated leadership from the past. So when I first got hired, my entire crew, I was at our special ops station. My entire crew had more time on the job than I had alive. I was I was 21 and just about to turn 22. So you want to talk about a generational difference? Like I wasn't even born; they were doing the job. Um, and I love those guys. I they were great. They helped me a lot, but there was a lot of generational difference, and
Yeah.
they came more from a paramilitary background, which yeah, we do share a lot of similarities with military, but we're not the military though.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that we have to encompass and bring in because we are firefighters, and we have our own special profession. And one of those things is that it's okay to be wrong, right? It's okay to be vulnerable, but you still have to do something about it. You're not just wrong. You're like, oh well, it's we can be honest with ourselves and say, you know what, yeah, I was wrong. I'm going to get better at that. I'm going to show you that I'm going to get better at that. Or vulnerable, like especially now with newer generations where you got to be the first one to say, you know what, that call was bad and it bothered me. Because everyone's thinking it. You don't go to some of these calls, and I'm sure you can think of your own and be like, yeah, no big deal. Like everyone thought about it in some way. It might have affected somebody up here, might have affected somebody down here, but you're the leader. So you're going to be the one that's going to say, you know what, that was bad. And that bothered me. And whether or not anyone wants to open up or not, you just showed that it was okay. It was
Yeah.
okay to feel that way. You're the leader. You're showing them, you're mentoring them, you're being the example on those things. And it's the same thing with being wrong, because that's something of the past that you couldn't be wrong. And that, like, okay, yeah, if I'm wrong, like if I'm going to make a mistake, I can feel the psychological safety here that I can say, you know what, I made a mistake too. And then we're not burying these things like landmines, or there's
Yeah.
no, resentment that's building or anything like that. So a lot of that's very difficult. It takes a lot of emotional currency. Um, but the key is the having that relationship, because when you care about someone, you don't mind spending emotional currency, because it matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When you say that, I always think back to this time. So when I was a volunteer on Long Island, I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday night, we were dispatched to a wreck. So Mondays are when the new people get sworn in, right? And depending on staffing, the rookies might get on the rig, they may not. And we were dispatched to an accident. So we lined out. We were ambulance first, engine second. There was two rookies on. I was lieutenant at the time. There's two rookies on the ambulance in the back, two pretty good folks up in front driving and serving as the officer. And I went on the engine, and we pulled up, and it was just a horrific wreck. I mean, it was a woman. She was hit by a truck, and just, I mean, just blood, gore, everything else. And we swapped out a little bit of the crews. One guy's like, I can't ride the back of the ambulance. Like, that's cool, man. You've been here for 2 days. No big deal. Go back on the engine. Everything's good. Other one went on the ambulance, and we worked. Person died, and ended up being a relative of a very famous person. So, it was in the news, and they were hearing about it day in and day out. So we get back from the call, and the guy that rode back on the engine, he's like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Again, it's 3 days in. They've had absolutely no training.
Right.
That was they broke bread with everybody after the dinner when they got voted in. And so we chatted for a bit, and it's like, hey man, like this isn't every call, right? This is once in a while. So we grabbed everybody and we talked. And again, this was back in 2003, right? So it's 20 some years ago, before all this stuff was really going on. Even some of that, stress first aid stuff wasn't really around. So we talked about it, and then, just follow up every day, right? And it was weird because it was the Nextel days, right? So you're not like chirping up like, bloop, hey, how you feeling today? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want that
I
conversation
remember
going
those
out
days.
wherever they
Yeah.
are. So you just jump on the phone and be like, hey man, just checking in, how you doing? So one of them was gone within like a week. The one that rode the ambulance. The other one ended up becoming an NYPD officer, I think detective now. But it was interesting because, again, that investment from the very get-go, like, it's the elephants in the room. So address it now, talk about it. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I the first time I think I saw a body, my father took me to a call for a person down in a pickup truck. It ended up being a suicide, right? Like, I was 4 years old. I saw it. I was like, oh my God, this is wild, right? Like, so I was indoctrinated into this stuff very early. So at least I tend to say like, it is what it is, right? Until it isn't.
Hmm.
Um, but that was something very important, and it was interesting because the year before, um, um, 2 weeks before September 11th, we brought like 15 people into the fire company. It was like the biggest group that ever came in. And after the 11th, there's a lot of stuff going on because we were not that far from New York City. We had members who were involved and all that. But it was like, hey, like, stick it out. Like, this is gonna be tough for everybody, but we'll see through it. And the majority of those folks are still members. But I mean, imagine that. You're not even a week and a half into being a volunteer, and all of a sudden, you're being called into New York City for this terrorist attack. And but it was those conversations, right? And we had to huddle up on that stuff. And I remember my chief at the time. It would have been Thursday night, so September 11th was Tuesday, Thursday night, and we all got together as a fire company because Fortunately for us, we didn't lose anybody in our department. The neighboring department had two members missing, two brothers. But our chief got us together and really brought our head back to where it needed to be, right? Hey, we're still here to serve. We're here to do this. We need people to volunteer to do this. We need people to do that. Because I was at the trade center. I came back about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The firehouse was full of food, donations, socks, gloves, all that kind of stuff. But we didn't know what was going on. It was just like boom in your face. But the chief did a good job of like, hey, here's what we've got to do. And then we all broke out in little groups and we talked about like, hey, what's going on? Because again, everybody was at a different level. Colleague, they're because we're volunteers, right? Their peers were in this and involved in this and that. Some folks that we had in our department, and their colleagues were killed because they were at work that day. They weren't at work, whatever it was. So it was an interesting time. But again, as leaders, they realized that right away, or even that time after we had the pedestrian struck, man, you have to have that conversation, and it is tough. But again, you're opening that door as an officer. You saying that, and that's the best thing you can do, I think, right? Ignoring it's not gonna, yeah, it's gonna be okay for you until it's not okay for
Right.
everybody, as opposed to opening that door and bring that conversation in.
Right. And that's what I speak about, especially in the new book too, is that mental health is absolutely a leadership issue. It's a leadership issue at every level, because not only are we trying to create, psychological safety in the workplace so that we actually get innovation, positivity, all the things that make, productivity work. Um, but we're also, in a line of work that it, the mental health or the mental state of the provider has an absolute, makes an absolute difference, like in
Yeah,
that service that's provided. And we are, as a fire department, or any department agency that's providing that service, we are entrusting people with a public trust to go into people's homes, to do the right thing, to, you know, do do medical service protocols under duress, for to save lives. So since we're putting that uniform on them, we should also make sure that they are mentally capable of doing those things to the best of our ability. Not everything is in our ability, right? We can't control things in their life, but there are things that we can control on a departmental side through wellness and peer support and having clinicians available, things like that. But from the leadership side, it's absolutely necessary for leadership because, again, if you use your experience with 9/11, right? If no leaders were helping with mental health, right, and everyone is at the edge of burnout, and then 9/11 happens, how much worse is that going to be? So we have to pregame all of these things. So how do we
yeah,
pregame mental health? Well, we pregame it, number one, with training, right? So if we can train our people to do well and do it well the first time, we're going to cut out a lot of regret and resentment,
yeah,
right? Because even when the call doesn't go well, and I've been on many calls where like we knocked it out of the park and that person didn't make it, just wasn't in the cards, right? But what I could do at the end of that call is say, you know what, you guys knocked it out of the park. There's no doubt about that. There is no reason that you should be upset with yourself. It was upsetting, but pat yourself on the back as you gave that person. If that was my loved one, I would have hoped you were there to provide that same service. So there's ways, that's one of them, training. Another way is to actually know your people. Again, that goes back to span of control. So for something like the call that you talked about earlier with that person that was hit by a vehicle, um, you could easily have someone on your crew that has a family member that was struck and killed by a vehicle, and now they're on that scene. How
yeah,
long ago was that? Is there a way for me to, like, if I need to know that and I need to see if it's necessary to shield them from something like that, just like that person was like, I'm not getting in the back of that ambulance. That's when you're like, fine, you don't have to
yeah,
get in the front.
yeah,
You know what I mean? That's not a moment where like, no, get back there unless it's absolutely necessary. And there's different things, ways that you can do that. You can have a conversation prior to that where someone's just coming back from, God forbid, leave because they lost a child or something like that. On your mind as a leader should be, I got to put a plan together. If we get a call today where it's a child, this is a real problem, right, for that person, and like to be able to protect them that way, give them options. They might say, you know what, I'm okay, don't do that. That's fine, but give them options
yeah,
to deal with that in a healthy way. And the other way we can help with mental health is by putting that currency back in the bank, right? We know that the emotional currency is going to come out. These calls are going to take it out. Sometimes it's a few cents, sometimes it's big bucks, right? On some of these calls that we see, we got to figure out how to put the money back. We've got to make deposits, right? There's a lot of withdrawals. So how do we make deposits? We got to humanize ourselves. Even on little calls, you can humanize yourself. Even on like a lift assist, I think in a previous episode you're talking about how they used to drive you crazy. Um, Even on that, like you're giving someone dignity, really, like
Yeah.
in a hard time, when that's like put yourself in that position. That is tough, right? And it's tough on the people, and you have a chance to give that person dignity, right? And when you're leaving that call, if someone's like, "Oh man, woke us up 3 a.m. This sucks," we're like, "Yeah, but you know what you did for that person? You gave them dignity. Pat yourself in the back." And purpose and meaning is how you get that currency back in the bank, right?
Yeah.
And you got to direct firefighters towards that because they're not going to do that. Firefighters cannot bring this back here and even go like that little tap. They hate to pat themselves on the back, because it's like, no, that's just my job. Yeah, it is your job, but it's a job that most people don't do because you're shouldering this tragedy of the community. You're choosing to
Yeah.
do that, and it's okay to say, you know what, I feel good about myself for doing that. And you need to do that in order to overcome, all these emotional withdrawals. We have to put it back in. So again, this is absolutely a leadership issue, especially in our profession, is that we need to help not only ourselves to do that, otherwise we're going to be a total mess, but we have to help our crews to do that as well. So they can get through this career, in a healthy way. We can be the leader, be the example on how to do that, how to get through these things and continue to enjoy the job and have passion.
I appreciate that advice. That's really, really good. And I think that that should hit home for everybody, especially, current officers right now. If they haven't really had that reality check, I think that's really important for them to probably go back, scrub it back a little bit and listen to that. So let's jump back into the leadership side, again, part of the book, right? And again, we're, generation wise, right? I think it's they say 4 generations in the fire service right now. And I think we're almost back to 3, right? Because there's been a lot of the boomers have retired. Um, but you're telling the that line, where you're at age wise between, the veterans and the folks that are just coming in, and then the folks that have been on for a few years. So, you know, lifestyles are different, values are different. Just as a whole, reactionary attitudes towards everything is a difference. So as an officer, how do you kind of balance that?
Um, I think you really need to be a student of generations. And obviously, a lot of this is generalities. But generalities, there's a reason why they're generality, because generally there's a truth behind some of this. So, what I mean is, knowing each generation and usually what they're strong and they're weak at, right? So I've been through a lot of different generations. I'm technically a millennial. So like I know Gen X, I know the Boomer generation, I know Gen Z and Alpha, I guess it's now, and all that. Everyone has their strengths, right? For example, one big thing, and I'm sure you've seen it. Many people listening have seen it, where when we were coming up, getting hired, yeah, we knew how to run a tool. We knew how to wash our
Yeah.
clothes or something like that, right? We came in knowing that. And then now they might not know that. They might not know how to wash their clothes. They might not know how to run a tool. Um, so you could say, well, look at that, they're less than we are or whatever. Okay, let's change the perspective. Remember when computers came and those guys that knew how to run tools, they could not type a sentence, right? They couldn't do a report, and they didn't want to do a report. They didn't want to do anything on the computer, right? But now this group that's coming in, right, that didn't know how to run a tool, they can type it 150 words per minute. They can do a report like that. They can knock out all kinds of computer based, like whatever it is, if it's making spreadsheets or whatever it might be for the department, they could do it like that, like for a project or whatever, when we couldn't. So there's if we change our perspective on a lot of that, every generation has its positives and its negatives, its strengths and its weaknesses, as it at least relates to the fire service. Are we going to play to those? are we going to play to the strength? That's what true leadership really is. Not being the smartest person or the best person in the room. It's knowing who that is and then putting him and delegating him into the role that fits that. And then hopefully building weaknesses as well so that, we can raise everything up. So how do we do that? How do we play to those strengths? And part of that is you kind of use generalities. If I know that people coming in now, they're going to know how to use a computer, like it's like simple, right? So I'll have them, teach certain things to my older guys. I'll have the older guys teach certain things to them. So, and a lot of it again is in the relationship. And so what I mean by that is if you are able to highlight as a leader, highlight the positive things, the strengths, what you do is create positivity, right? So if you do the opposite, you're going to make people hate each other. But if you do the positives, it changes your viewpoint. So for example, you're around the table, right? The Firehouse table. And I could point to one of my younger people and say, you're really good at that computer system. You really helped me figure this thing out, like awesome at that. And now I've painted that person in a good light. They might have
Yeah.
had a really tough time with the ladder today. I put it upside down or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? That happens. They were trying hard. Their attitude's there. But if I highlight that, how does that affect the rest of the table? Now all I see is negative, right? But I didn't do that. I highlighted the positive. And if we do that for each of our people, what we do is we look for reasons to like them, not dislike them. And that's how we create generational cohesion. The other part of that is understanding what makes them tick, right? So I know with Gen X, Boomer generations, that if you keep saying, "Hey, great job" to them, they'll be like, "Yeah, I know." Like, tell me if I'm doing it wrong. Don't bother me with that. But if I don't do that to like the younger millennials, Gen X, whatever, if I'm not, "Hey, good job," they're like, "Am I doing it or not?
Yeah.
Am I doing it? Tell me." So like you have to understand too generationally, you know what makes people tick, because younger generations now are used to more instant gratification, to where it's like I need the feedback loop has to be shorter. Older generations, it doesn't. So how I treat them is going to be a little bit different, right? So if you're not a student of that type of game, like, okay, this generation likes this generation's like this or whatever, you're going to have a hard time. And then that's just at the most basic level, right? Because back to the span of control, now I know exactly what makes you tick, right? So I was working off generality, right? I'm thinking that because you're an older person, you probably don't want positive feedback, every 2 seconds. That's going to annoy you, right? But now I actually know you because I have a relationship with you. This is actually what makes um, you tick. This is what motivates you. This thing. So now I'm going to use that tool instead, right? So at the bottom level, it's okay. Generationally, I know these. You're probably going to want these types of things. As I get to know you, now I'm graduating to even better use of motivational tools and positivity. And and again, like that generational gap, like you cannot allow negativity at all to get in there in any form. It can't be, unless it like just basic busting balls and that kind of stuff. That's great, but if it goes past anything like that, and it's starting to get um you know really cut someone or hurt someone, or be mean spirited, that cannot be in there. If you're trying to bridge gaps, you cannot allow anything like that in there, and
Yeah.
you got to be the example of it, like big time. So I mean, yeah, generational differences, it's tough, sure. The more you get to know each person, have a relationship with them, it's not. And the more you change your perspective, and the more that you find it find pride in being able to work with weaknesses instead of hate it. Like something as simple as like I've literally taught someone to ride a bike before at the station. They didn't know how to ride a bike. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like I was like, wow, I got to teach someone to ride a bike. That's awesome. Or even if it's laundry, like I got to teach someone how to do their own laundry. And now when they do their laundry, they're gonna think that guy did this for me
Stepped
every
up and
time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's something
Yeah.
as simple as that. And that goes both ways. So if we can change our perspective that way, we can focus on the strengths, not the weaknesses. We can figure out, generationally what usually works and then tailor that to the relationship, understand what really makes it work. Then we're going to be able to span generational gap. It's not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah. I appreciate that insight. I mean, that's really good. And again, you hear that conversation all the time, and interesting talking about, the millennials, right? They don't know how to use a tool or anything. And I had a eureka moment a few years ago. I was riding with a company and talking to a guy, and he was telling me he lived on the 16th floor of a high rise, right? He lived in a housing project. So he had never used a tool, never did any mechanical skills whatsoever. If they needed something, something came in. So the next day, I was headed to the airport flying home, and I was thinking of my friends' kids. Like, again, if somebody's 20 something years old now, they have a landscaper. They have somebody who comes out and puts up the Christmas lights. They've got the monthly membership to the car wash, right? So those things that we grew up and had pride on, like I bit the bullet. I finally got like a monthly pass to the car wash like 3 months ago, just because most of the old school car washes here are gone. Or there's people I don't really want to deal with when I'm trying to wash my car hanging out there. But but when I started really thinking about that, I was like, and it's like they're the problem. They're not it's actually their parents that allowed them to, not do the lawn. But again, that's just it's a society. Everything's a subscription, right? Every service that you need, whether it's music, food delivery, you know, car washing, laundry, whatever, it's all a subscription. So nobody actually does that work anymore. And so I really that was between riding with that guy and then that thought I had afterwards. I was like, man, that really changed my outlook on things that really turned it because just about a month before we had a conversation with somebody who was writing an article how in the academy they had to do a whole program about or a whole day about how to wash rigs, what you do, you do this, you do that, watch for the diesel and that kind of stuff. I know in academy that they do a full day of cooking, right? Because again, most places cook still, together. But as they were finding out, people would come out of the academy with no cooking skills. So you literally had to dedicate a day in the academy to the basics of cooking. And I was talking to a friend of mine, actually, he was one of the culinary schools he went to. So he'll spend time with the rookies. Like he's like, I know you're not going to be me, but here's the basics on knives and everything else. And he goes, again, it's kind of scary. They're coming out with no knife skills. Like they're willing to slice their hand off to try and cut a carrot without, and it's like meanwhile, we're trusting them to rescue somebody, but they've learned those skills in the academy, right? So now it's
Right.
a chance to teach the rest of them. But it is fascinating. And I think again too, the willingness to share is the key, right? Before you kind of knew that person knew how to do something, and if they stepped up to show you, they did. If they didn't, they probably didn't like you. So, whatever it is, but that's all changed where that team and cohesion has come together. So um so in some of the stuff I had read about your book when you first brought it out was, you know, getting rid of the outdated leadership principles, right? And again, I think we talked about that again in the beginning. If there's one fire service leadership principle that's still being taught, written about, et cetera, that you feel needs to go, what is it?
I think it would go back again to the being the smartest guy in the room type of thing, never being wrong or never being allowed to be vulnerable. I think that's still kind of like it might not come out and say it in like leadership, but it's kind of like this pervasive feeling, that you can't be wrong. If you're a leader, you can't be wrong.
Yeah,
If you can't be vulnerable, and humility usually isn't like something that you talk about like a lot um in there, and I just that's just not correct. And again, being the smartest guy in the room, that's not a good place to be anyway, even if you are, because you should be the dumbest person in the room, otherwise you're not going to learn a thing. So you should probably find a better room. And then if you are the smartest person in the room, if you're not teaching everyone in that room, then you're also a dummy for not bestowing that knowledge on the people around you. um yeah, I mean, with the outdated thing, it really is mostly ignoring yourself, um ignoring your inner qualities, and and that is really the basis of all leadership, because if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anyone else. And I find a lot of times that that's definitely lacking. Most modern leadership stuff is like a lot of buzzwords. Just, be loyal or be humble or whatever, but there's no actual like actionable steps to do that. Like, how do I actually do that? Like, what does that look like in practice? And a lot of it doesn't even come down to how to lead yourself even in like a physical way. And that's why in my new book I talk about that more. About there's a in a chapter about leading yourself, it's about building your own self-esteem, because again, how you treat others on the outside is how you feel about yourself really on the inside. Like, if you feel like crap on the inside, that's how you're going to treat other people. If you're, you know you know hate yourself, if you treat yourself bad, like, you're not going to like turn around and be a great leader to anyone.
Yeah.
And we all know things that we are afflicted with. I mean, you look in the mirror, and for long enough, you'll figure it out. Or if you ask some people that care about you and know you, what do I need to work on, they'll tell you if they're honest. And the point is to do those things, to fix those things. And it's not just an emotional side where, like we spoke about before with, this thing triggers me, I need to work on that, that's not right. But it's also getting your um, physical needs handled, where you're stepping up into a leadership role. This isn't like, a lot of misconception is, if I'm a firefighter, I might as well be an officer and I'll get paid more to do the same thing. And it's absolutely not true. Like, I hate to tell you, that is not true at all. Like, you're going to need to buckle down and really get better at yourself, really get better at relationships, really get better at communication, really get better at nonverbal communication. And you're going to use all of it in ways that you never thought. And part of that too is having the physical capacity to do it. So, you know, your habits probably going to need to change. Go to bed early, eat better, sleep more, type stuff. And all that stuff is hard to do because they're major habit changes. I mean, you look at like an average firefighter, whether they're guzzling, energy drinks way too late, they're not sleeping well, they're up, probably drink too much. There's all these things that, if you really want to be a good leader, that stuff's got to change. And that actually gives you the mental bandwidth to then deal with yourself, to get your own, uh, issues under control, get your soft skills up, learn, have a healthy place to learn. Now I can really learn to communicate. Now I can actively listen. Now I can do these things because I'm comfortable with myself. I have confidence in myself. I have self-esteem to where I can allow myself to be wrong. It's
Yeah.
not going to break me, right? Because I'm confident. I can allow myself to be vulnerable because I like me. And if I allow myself to be vulnerable and someone not nice is going to throw that back in my face, that's on them. And I feel bad for them that they're that type of person. But I like me, you know what I mean? And I'm confident in my brand, so to speak. And that is really, I think, the future of leadership. And that's where we leave an outdated idea of what leadership is in the rear view.
I love it. I appreciate the insight. I mean, I think that's really good, and um, it's just something good to hear from somebody else who's actually doing this, and again through the level of your book where I think it talks about that human connection. Not necessarily, it's not hidden in there, but that's what you talk about throughout the book. Again, the healthy attitude before, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about too was you talk about positive attitudes in the book, right? And I think that encompasses everything, right? If you have a positive attitude, whether you're the boss or whether, you're trying to get everybody on a team, and you mentioned before, right? You're building those people, right? Let's not, get folks to hate other folks. Let's build everybody up and that positive attitude. If everybody starts off like that, and it's like whether it's the city, it's the the Chiefs, whatever it is that's keeping everybody down. But if everybody starts with that positive attitude at 7 o'clock in the morning, it goes there. So talk about how do you instill a positive attitude, or how do you ensure and keep everybody in check that they've got a positive attitude throughout the day?
Well, it starts with you as the leader, obviously. So, like, if you're negative at all, if you got to cut it out, man. So you got to figure out what that takes. So you coming into work, listen to your favorite song. I don't know, like pet the dog on the way out, whatever it is, But get in the mindset for when you come in, you're positive because you're going to set the tone. And we've all come into a station where, it's not good. You can tell right away. And we had like a funny term for like a captain that's like setting a bad tone. We call it angry dad, right? Because when
Yeah,
when dad's angry, everyone hides in their room, right? And you can feel
yeah,
that tone, right? In a station, everyone hides in their bunk when dad's angry. So the captain sets the tone, right? So or the lieutenant, whoever the ranking officer is in your fire department in the station. So you have to understand what tone you're setting. You might think you're setting a great tone, and you're not. So maybe time to have a little talk with your informal leader and say, "Hey, how am I doing right here? I'm trying to, am I positive? Is people like, how are they feeling about it? And be ready to hear something you might not like. Who knows? Or they could say, no, no, like you're super positive, man. It's great. But this is really what's bugging people. Oh, now I know. They come to you. You're my informal leader. Now I get to have like the back door on conversation I'm not privy to. So
yeah,
number one, it's us, right? That we're gonna set that tone. Then number two, it is our informal leader, right? Because when we leave, we can set the positive tone all day long, but if we don't know who our co-pilot is, right, they could fly the plane in the opposite direction as soon as we leave, right? So we need to know who that is. So who's our informal leader and what tone are they setting? So I mean, a lot of times one of the more senior people is the informal leader, right? So and unfortunately, if you're more senior, you might be closer to burnout. You could, have certain ideas, through your experiences of the city and the station and the zone, because things don't go well. I mean, now I'm like the senior guy at the station. I feel the weight of years of dealing with certain things that bother me. Yeah, it sucks. So we have to work past that and get into the positive. So with our informal leader, how do we do that? Well, that's coaching, right? So like we try to work with them, get them positive, right? So that when we leave the room, the next guy they're looking to, yeah, they're positive too, right? And
yeah,
the devil's in the details too with positivity. It's not just that we're cutting out negativity, but we're giving people reasons to be positive, right? So again, like I said, we're highlighting strengths, right? We're never highlighting weaknesses. If we're doing that, it's like a one-on-one thing. That's not in front of anyone. So if there's some training issue or whatever, that we're not singling anyone out on that. That does not work. Where that's a one-on-one thing or a crew thing together where we're doing this thing together to learn and we're not putting that on somebody. Um, but not only are we doing that, so we're doing the positive, we're not singling people out, but we're also looking for little ways to just up the ante, right? So what I mean is, so for me as the leader in the firehouse, I keep my eye out, see what everyone's doing. They might not think so, but I'm always looking. Like, what's he doing? What's she doing? Okay, they're having a little joke over there. That's good. I like that. That seems positive. Okay, that person's been like on the phone. They seem pretty upset for like 30 minutes. I'm gonna need to deal with that later. I got to figure out why if they want to let me know. All these little things happen. But on the inside of that, say the probationary employee is washing his clothes, right? I might time it to where when the dryer's done, I'll fold it for him, right? So now he'll come and realize, oh my God, someone folded my clothes, right? Even if he finds out it's me or not, everyone is senior to him. So what is he thinking? I better do something for somebody else
yeah,
right away, right? So what does he do? He goes and does something for somebody else. What do they think? Someone just did something for me. I got to do something for somebody else. And it's those kinds of things. It's the same type of psychology where when it's chores time and someone breaks out the broom, everyone's like, oh my God, now we all got to start. You know what I mean? But it's because you're not going to leave your guys behind. You're not going to let someone clean around you. So it's the same thing with leadership, where it's like you're the example of that. So if you want positivity, be positive, do the positive things, and highlight the strengths,
yeah,
and make sure your informal leader is doing that too. And once both of you are flying that same path, everyone is going to be jumping on board because everyone wants to be on that flight, right? I mean, that sounds great. Who doesn't
yeah,
want to do that and be a part of that kind of a group, right? And then what you get is you get participation, right? Where people aren't hiding in their bunks. right? They want to be a part of that, and they're looking for things to do for each other, and they're having a good time. And then the fun things of the firehouse come out, where now people feel safe enough to like joke and laugh and sing songs and do all kinds of stupid stuff that we do at the firehouse. And then you really have that cohesion, and then all of a sudden, the all the stupid pressures that we leave, hopefully, when we come into the fire service, the political divide, the stupid crap we see on the news, the yada yada yada, is gone, and what's left is the people, right? The people that are brothers and sisters.
I That's great, man. I mean, um that's some pretty good insight. I'm really just kind of blown away by that because again, right, it is the basics, and I think a lot of places have gone away from that. But investing in that time, right, and across the board, and I think everybody could use that. We were talking about social media earlier and everything else, right, and how that's really kind of thrown people off, right? Social media, it makes people feel bad. It makes them feel underrated. It makes them feel, that they're 7 steps behind their friends who are on a vacation or this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's just a society who we are, right? And picking on people in Firehouse. I mean, my buddy once taught me, right? They build you down to build you back up, right? They beat you down to build you back up. And it does sometimes it becomes that reality check, right? You thought you were here, but they're going to build you or they're going to break you down, build you back up to the point that you need to be at, as opposed to where you think you're currently at. And I think that's really important. So, um,
Yeah, I mean
um,
that works, but
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
work all the time. It's
yeah,
not something like I'm just going to continue to beat you down and then build you back up on every single thing. It's like you don't need to use that tool, and that's one of the tools in the toolbox, but not
yeah,
every time. And that's kind of a piece of outdated leadership too. From when I got hired, is that's the only tool they use. That thing was whittled down to nothing because they used it so much. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Where it's like it's
yep,
okay to use a different tool. Like there's other ways to teach. And figuring out what tool works for each situation is that's the hard thing, and that's different for everybody, and that's span of control coming right back, like
yeah.
what tool is going to work right here on this person at this moment.
Full circle. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Well, so, you know, as we kind of start to wrap up here a bit today, sorry, my notes are on the other screen. I moved them. I apologize. I got to take a quick note there.
no problem.
All right. So as we wrap up today, we've been talking about the Modern Fire Officer, your book, right? But what's a book that is a must for any of your readers, listeners, friends to look at, leadership wise or otherwise? What's a throwdown book that everybody should have in your recommendation?
I really, and I mentioned it in my first book, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. It's just like a really thoughtful kind of look at making yourself better. And like I said, that's really the foundation. So if your foundation's got to be right, and it's some of the rules are kind of funny, like don't stop your kids from skateboarding, and what that's getting at is like the kids need adventure, they need some danger. You can't helicopter them to the point where they're useless type thing. And there's he talks about like a bunch of little like aspects of that, like nuances, like and like how to feel like letting go and being comfortable. And so there's that it's just like an insightful read, I think. And it helps kind of put a mirror a bit to like how would I do that, and would that be positive or negative, net positive, net negative, for my relationships. Another good friend of mine, John Cuomo, he's got a book called Leadership Refined by Fire. And he's but well read. It's definitely a higher um, like I would say reading level type book, because he gets a lot into like stoicism with like Marcus Aurelius and like Dostoevsky, and like a lot of that type of postmodernism, a little bit of like that type of psychology, um, and how that kind of like helped him in his fire service journey. So it's not a light read, but it's a good read. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, those two I like a lot. they're very good. And yeah, it just helps you on your way. And again, like, the self-reflective journey is a journey with no finish line. And that's the one that's going to make you a better leader. So, start getting on pace. It doesn't have to be a sprint. Just chip away. That's how we eat the elephant, one bite at a time. So,
Amen.
yeah.
Amen. Okay. And talk a little bit about the book, your new book coming out. I know you kind of teased it at the beginning, but
Yeah, yeah, I
it's not
have
out
the
yet, but
proof. Yeah, so that's
awesome.
the proof of the new one. Building legacy that endures, and it obviously won't have this not for sale line. That's the how Amazon does their proof copy, so you can't resell it while you're in the process of looking through it. But
Smart.
yeah, um, so there's a part of the book talks a lot about leadership. Your more of your senior leadership. This book is for, and it talks a lot about putting people over systems, and that's a lot of what relational servant type leadership is we got to put people over systems, and people know when they're not put over a system, and it affects it negatively. It kills culture. I mean, if people feel like they're just a cog, in the wheel, then they're not going to give you anything. And so we have to create systems that make them feel like they're not just a cog in the wheel. And um, over a few decades, we've added a lot of services to fire department, fire rescue, a lot of services. But what have we done to support the people that are now delivering those services? Is there a correlation in the support that we're giving those people to now give those services that have, I would argue, doubled even since
Yeah.
I've been hired? I mean, if something as simple as taking our like EMS protocol book, because we're all paramedics, that thing went from like a few pages to a stinking like EMS manual, right? So right there, I mean, you could easily say our service doubled that way, even in the medical portion. But what have so we're asking for more um, in a world with more liability, right? We're in a world with more serious events, more political division, more stressors that are leaking into the firehouse, unfortunately. But then we've done nothing to lift those people that are holding all of that service up, right? We're doing nothing to support them. And I think that that's why we're seeing on a 10-year trend more burnout, less retention, less hiring interest, all these different problems that across the nation, people are saying, yeah, we used to have 1,000 people show up to this application process. Now we have 80.
Wow.
And we don't have the luxury of saying, well, I guess firefighting is not for them. It's like, no, we have to get people in here and get them trained and get them on the trucks to run the calls. So, we don't have the luxury of just, closing the doors. We got to do something about it. We got to figure it out. And the book in a way is a challenge to that, to leadership, to say, hey, these are problems and we're going to need to call them out like it's the elephant in the room type of thing, and we're going to work on this thing together. And then it gets into a lot of the leadership stuff that we talked about today, about knowing who your informal leader is, the span of control idea of how that's relational. um, it gets into delegation, why that's so important, how you have to delegate with trust. And when you delegate it, you're not abandoning someone just like, here, take that and you're gone. No, it's like, this is a mentorship when you delegate too. But it's a special one where you give people space too, so they can get it done. But if they need help, you help them, and understand that sometimes, yeah, you could do it better yourself, but that's not what it's about. It's about development of somebody else. And so
Yeah.
it gets into a lot of different, more higher level leadership. It gets past the like, work on your foundation, get better at communication, those types of things that the first book talked about, which is like, I hope if you're in a chief level position, or position, captain, PC, chief level, whatever, that you have that. I hope that you have a foundation that's strong, that you have communication skills, that you're able to do those things. Now it's, how good are you at even the higher level thinking? How are you with delegating with purpose, being trainable yourself? How honest are you with the support that the department gives to the firefighters, and how do you view them? Are you do you view them as in service to them or to the public? Because really, in my opinion, the further you get away, right, the guys on the street, their customer is the actual person, is the citizen of that needs the help. But higher than that, when you're not touching a patient anymore, you're not in the field. The firefighter becomes the customer
Yeah.
at that point. And how do we get them supported so they can give the service that we would like them to? And are we viewing the department and everything that we're doing through that lens? Because when we do, then yeah, now we're going to get buy-in, right? Now we're going to have good service on the street. Now we're going to start killing uh, burnout. Now we're going to have a healthy department that's going to be able to get through all these things that the world is throwing at us, all the stressors and pressures and all that bull crap. And we can shield ourselves in with that firehouse where we can keep that outside. We can keep healthy people in here, and we can do a good job, limit liability, kill as much mental health distressors as we can, and do what we love and what we have passion for.
I love it. And again, I think another theme is just a lot of self-reflection as an officer, right? I think that's another common theme throughout the show today. But it's not just the lieutenants and the captains, right? It's the chiefs. When you get to that, again, the customer level, because I think that's important, right? Even internally here, we talk about that. We've got customers. The customers, on Firehouse are not only the readers, but the advertisers, the potential advertisers, the folks that we see at events, but the customers also include you as a contributor or one of the authors. And, I think we forget about that a lot. And it's very easy to lose sight of that, right? Because it's all part of the a process. But when you don't treat them as a valued, important part of the process, yeah, you can start to have that foundation crumble a little bit. And it's important to have customer service no matter what it is that you do. And I mean, you go into a store nowadays, right? How often do you actually see customer service still being applied in the store, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's out the window, right?
forget
And
it.
I'm not going to say it's okay in a store, right? Like you look at like, Valentine's Day this past week, right? Like I'm sure restaurants and everything else were a mess. Because it's a different caliber of people. They're not necessarily worried about the customers coming in. They're worried about themselves. And I think again, that's humanity as we're changing. But when you put on that uniform, it is about them, right? And I've had that conversation once, right? Firefighters on the career side, I can say that, right? Because you take a civil service test in a lot of places, but you are a servant. You're there to serve the community. But when you promote, you're still a civil servant, but as you promote, the servants are
Right, the civil
it's
servants
changed.
that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
under
it's
you.
it's
Yeah,
yeah. So it changes, and I hope people don't forget that. But I mean, but that's just interesting as we kind of wrap. But you talk about that, right? Again, it's just having that ongoing self-reflection, as an organization, as a person, as a crew leader, where you're at and where you're going. I love it. I love it. So, well, Jared, man, thank you so much for joining us again. I'll put a link to everything here, modernfirestore.com. We'll put your LinkedIn page as well. Anything else before we wrap up today?
no, I think that's it. It's an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you having me on, thinking of me for the show. And yeah, again, the new book should be coming out like end of this month, March. So look for it. Modern Fire Officer series now, and Building Legacy That Endures is the new one. So you can see like the three helmets there. The other one has just the captain's red helmet, so you can see even by the cover a little different, so you can identify the book. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy it.
Love it. All right. Well, Jared, thanks so much. Good luck with the new book, and it'll be on your website as well, right? So if folks are
Yeah,
listening to
yeah,
this after the book launches, they can find
yeah,
it there. So,
and it'll be on Amazon, and
okay.
you'll be able to find it. Yeah,
All right, perfect. All right, buddy. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you back on. I think I'd love to come back and revisit it just on the topic of mental health as an officer. I think, again,
awesome.
between
Yeah,
your time on peer support and some of the other conversations we had today, we didn't gloss over. You definitely gave it some time, but I think we should certainly revisit that later in the year about the officer's role across the board. So, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Firehouse Yak podcast from firehouse.com, which is produced by Endeavor Business Media, a division of Endeavor B2B. For more conversations, visit firehouse.com/podcast, where you can find all the shows as well as the show notes from each podcast. Or you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Stay safe, stay educated, and keep on training. Visit firehouse.com for the latest fire service news, training, and more. See you on the next one.